Located just outside the Susquehanna Greenway river town of Williamsport lies a chain of mysterious man-made islands right in the very middle of the Susquehanna River. On this segment of Get Out on the Greenway, we're looking back more than a century to learn about the origins of these strange islands and their key role in Pennsylvania's lumber history.
The height of the lumber industry in this area probably started around the middle of the 1800s. The location of Williamsport made it a successful logging city because it's situated on a stretch of the Susquehanna River that is relatively long and straight. It doesn't have the twists and turns that the Susquehanna River has in other parts of the state. A boom is essentially a corral built in the river. It was meant to catch the logs as they were floating down. So it was a series of wooden frames that they called cribs that were built. They were connected by a chain of floating logs. So as the logs came down the river, they would be caught in the boom, and that would give the workers time to sort them out. The Susquehanna Boom was the largest of the boom companies. There were several in this area, but that was the biggest one. The boom rats were the workers who actually were out on the boom helping to sort out the logs and catch the logs, because once all the logs were collected in the boom, it was a log jam, a literal log jam. That's where that term comes from. And so the boom rats were the ones who went out, basically had to walk on the logs and pry them apart to break those log jams, and then work them into the sorting pens for each different company. Each company had its own brand. They would mark the ends of the logs, just like cattle in a corral. And so the boom rats were the ones who were directing the logs to the appropriate pen. There is a statue on the Susquehanna River Walk right at Market Street. It's a statue representing a boom rat, sort of showing what they looked like. He's holding a pike pole, which is the tool that they use to pry the logs apart and move them. The boom started going into a decline after the 1880s. It's for a couple reasons. There were a couple floods here that damaged the boom, and they had to rebuild it. And between that and the railroads coming in as a sort of a replacement method for transporting logs, companies just weren't using the boom as much. But the biggest issue was that they were clear-cutting the forests. They didn't have conservation in mind, the lumber companies. They were just basically taking what they needed and moving on. A lot of the companies then started moving out west or down south where there was still plenty of forests to be had. After the forests were clear-cut and the logging industry kind of went down, they did have a reforestation effort. So a lot of the trees you see in the mountains now is actually new growth. The entire riverbank looks completely different than it did in the logging era. On the river at the Susquehanna State Park, there is a series of what looks like small islands. Those are actually the boom cribs, the frames that were part of the boom. They've been overgrown, kind of reclaimed by nature, but that's sort of the remain of the boom. The best way to explore the boom today would probably be, getting a kayak or canoe and just going down a nice trip on the river. You can get pretty close to those islands, and you can actually, just under the surface of the water, you can still see the cribs.
So there you have it, a piece of Susquehanna history that you can explore right from your kayak. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you out on the Greenway.